throughout our 2 hours here. We're going to turn now to Kansas City, which is cleaning up after the protests. At one point, police there were using tear gas to break up crowds. The mayor instituted a curfew. The sheriff said many, if not all, of the officers there had been pelted or hit at some point with what they described as violence. But that's not the only thing that happened. There was not only hostility between the police and protesters. Here's a moment of a Kansas City police officer hugging a protester, putting aside everything from our social distancing to the putative tension we hear about between these communities for a moment that now has also galvanized many in that community. We have a special guest right now. We're joined by the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. That's Quinton. I should mention we were law school classmates and friends. This is the first time I've interviewed you on air, and I'm sure we're both sorry it's not under better circumstances, but it is good to see you. How are you?
You know what? I'm doing all right, Ari. It's good to see you again. I wish these were better times in our country, but I know we'll figure it all out. We just need to make sure we remember the life of George and make sure more than anything that we can make our community safe for all people.
And Quinton, as mentioned, I'll use our history as a point of experience. I've known you for a long time, and I've known that you have been deeply interested and committed to working on issues of civil rights and representation for a long time. Here you are as a mayor in this situation. I was just reading up where you said, I'm going to read the quote back to you, you said that you're trying to do everything you can here dealing with safety, security, running the police force, but also the civil rights. You said, quote, you know what, I'm a black man in America, so I understand a lot of this too. Why don't you walk us through how you're approaching this with all of the different ways that you look at the challenge?
Well, you know, Ari, it's actually been a little more difficult than almost anything I've dealt with so far in politics. And the reason for that is that, you know, when I saw the video out of Minneapolis, I felt pain. And it brought back so many memories. It brought back a memory from when I was a kid, looking at the Rodney King beating, and at the time, not understanding how those officers aren't convicted, right? Not understanding really how every incident after that, as I became an adult, as I became a grown black man, why these things keep happening. And here we are 28 years later, and we're seeing the same thing. That's what's frustrating to so many people. So I get that. But the other part of, I think, the challenge that I have as a mayor, and frankly, that every mayor, particularly every one of our black mayors, and you saw that voice, that passion out of Atlanta, you've seen it in so many other places, is how do we make sure that we can keep order so that this doesn't become the sort of thing that is a moment that's lost, like the Los Angeles riots. Right? Instead, it's something where we say, yeah, black lives do matter. We're going to push policies in every part of America that shows that they do. And frankly, we're going to get all of this energy and this aggression and make a change so that young me from 92, right, that version of me now, isn't sitting up 28 years from now and saying, how, when we've made all this progress in America, is it still the same that a black man or black woman is not just concerned about violent crime, but they're also concerned about policing?
That makes sense. You look at what your own chief was saying. Chief Smith said you have officers in the hospital here from patrolling the situation, and then goes on to say he asked every officer who worked this protest if they'd been hit by a projectile, and he says every single one said they'd been, quote, assaulted in some way. How do you navigate that, given what you just said? And what are you saying to officers, if anything, about the larger context? Obviously, crime, violence, assault is wrong. You're a mayor and an attorney to boot. But obviously, many of the people in those crowds feel that they are reacting to what they've been through.
You know, what I would say, first of all, is thank you to the many of our officers in Kansas City who worked long hours yesterday, all weekend, to make sure that people had a right to protest, had a right to speak. And as you saw in that video out of Kansas City, a lot of our officers were very friendly to the protesters. But I think what I would say to that spirit and to that message is that you cannot let, right, in the same way that actually officers always ask us not to have the actions of one distort our view of American policing on the whole, police officers shouldn't do the opposite, right? We know good and darn well that yesterday in Kansas City, there were thousands of people that came out to make their voices heard, to speak peacefully, to try to actually share a message that needs to be amplified, right? And we also know that in my city, there were a few hundred fools at the end who wanted to burn cars, who wanted to loot, who wanted to do all that sort of stuff. That is not what this message is about. That's not what this moment is about. And I know that my police chief, Rick Smith, and all police chiefs in the country can and should understand that the message here is one that says we actually want to have a close relationship. We want accountability. We want that connection in our communities. And all of us, I think, should actually abhor some of the actions that we've seen in looting and some of the vandalism we've seen around the country.
Mayor Quinton Lucas, very interesting to get your perspective, and as mentioned, good to see you, sir. Up next, we go from President Donald Trump's inflammatory rhetoric to the lack of any address from the leader of the United States during this time. Like many other things right now, this is unusual. Many questioning whether it should be normalized. Any historic situation we've seen like this from a president in either party, we would have heard directly from the president by now. You're watching MSNBC.
Thursday, Lawrence O'Donnell talks with apparent Democratic nominee Joe Biden.
We need to stand up as a nation with the black community, with all minority communities, and come together as one America.
He'll be joined by Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren to answer your questions and discuss a nation on edge and the economic challenges ahead.
I want to go to the complexity of what you'll be facing on day one.
A last word special, Joe Biden with Elizabeth Warren, Thursday at 10 on MSNBC.
Once weekly, Ozempic is helping many people with type 2 diabetes like James lower their blood sugar. A majority of adults who took Ozempic reached an A1C under 7 and maintained it.
Here's your A1C.
Oh, my A1C is under 7.
And you may lose weight. Adults who took Ozempic lost on average up to 12 pounds.
I lost almost 12 pounds.
Oh.
For those also with known heart disease, Ozempic lowers the risk of major cardiovascular